First of all, I want to thank Pastor Josh for asking some of us to share an encouraging word, a devotion. I've been looking forward to this, and I just want to say how much I appreciate Pastor Josh for how he's led our church in preparation for response to the coronavirus and all that goes with that, and he's done a great job. Our current circumstances paint a picture of vulnerability. Those with chronic physical illnesses, asthma, diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease, and cancer, to mention just a few. Those who are older, with some saying over 60, and that catches quite a few of us. Some saying that those are over 70, especially older individuals with these chronic illnesses, and those who are in the healthcare field and are ministering to those with the virus. These are the most vulnerable among us. In my devotions lately, I've been studying through 1 Timothy, and in chapter 5, Paul instructs Timothy about how to minister to the most vulnerable in their society, in that case, the widows. These were women who had no wage earner, a husband, to work and care for their needs. In their society, there was no Medicare and Medicaid, no Social Security or social services. No safety net for women who could not work and meet their own needs, nor the family's physical and other needs like food and clothing and housing. These women often fell through the cracks, which in that day were wide open and lethal. One of the first acts of the early church was to care for these widowed women by selecting deacons to look after their needs. Among them, the first martyr, Stephen. Here in 1 Timothy, Paul was giving Timothy some principles for helping these most vulnerable. Principles, I believe, that ought to direct our action as individuals in the church today. I won't take time to read the whole passage, but I encourage you to read 1 Timothy 5, 3 through 10, and reflect on the principles I'm going to lay out for you. They are few and they are simple, but we need to heed them and minister to the most vulnerable that I listed for you, that in fact the news shows and the political leaders are listing for us over and over. First of all, we need to know the situation, know the challenge, even what we might call the enemy, that is the virus. Timothy was told to know Paul's command to help. He was told to know who is truly in need, and he was to know those who were truly vulnerable in verse 5. This is no time to turn off the TV or radio or even the internet or Facebook and hide our heads in the sand. For that matter, even as I was first writing this devotional, I had the news on, and I am learning from a trusted source about the pandemic. Listen and learn. Know the symptoms and the solutions and the possibilities we have for service. We dare not fly blind. We may be one of the vulnerable, but without knowledge, we would not know it. Our family member or one of our fellow church members may be one of the vulnerable, and we need to know the symptoms that may for them be terribly devastating. We need to know all we can know in order to act with compassion and with competence. We need to know who is in need. Actually, we need to know who is in the most need. In verse 9 and following, Paul gives direction on how to know if a widow is truly in need or not. Yes, this requires that we know the symptoms and the most vulnerable by age and health category, but it also requires that we be in touch with one another, certainly with care, maybe by Zoom or Skype, maybe by phone or Facebook or email. How else will we know if they are in need and what they need? I'm somewhat old-fashioned, but I think the systems of communication that might come the closest to face-to-face are the most effective in communicating our concern and care, but also are important for us to see how vulnerable and in need the person on the other end of our communication is. Basically, reach out. Don't compromise one another by meeting face-to-face, but if you need to deliver something to them, keep your 6 feet of distance. We need to know how everyone is doing. And finally, we need to know what needs to be provided. Verse 8 says, if anyone does not provide for his family, and it goes on to talk about what the family included. If you have a need for the staples of life or for simple human interaction, let Pastor Josh know. He has people who have signed up to help wherever they can and with whomever they can. He is our clearinghouse right now for carrying out the life-giving services that may be necessary. We are of one house, God's house at Park Place. We are most responsible for providing, if at all possible, for one another. Now for a bit of a disclaimer. In this passage, as you read it, you'll see that there is a spiritual concern that Paul voiced. He is afraid that there are those in the church family who do not really have need or who have a disqualifying spiritual problem. He lays out some groundwork for Timothy to make that differentiation. Is the widow truly vulnerable or not? I personally do not think this is a time for us to be discerning that issue today. People are just older, or physically unsettled, or socially distanced, or without some of the basic stuff of life. We simply need to know what, who, and how. There may come a time when this virus runs its course that we will need to differentiate. When that time comes, we should leave that discernment to our leaders, Pastor Josh and the church officers. For now, we, like the people of Ephesus with their vulnerable people, simply need to know all we can in order to serve in every way that we can. As I thought about sharing these thoughts, I was reminded about the group of retired men that I would normally be meeting with tomorrow. That's Tuesday. Of course, we will not be meeting, but I can be meeting with them by phone, and if I can get it worked out, maybe by Zoom. So tomorrow, or by the time you hear this, or by yesterday or last Tuesday when you hear this, I will be calling them just to check in and see if there is need. What will you be doing today to minister to the most vulnerable among us? May God bless you and encourage you as He informs your knowledge of what, who, and how, and as He leads you to reach out to the most vulnerable in our families, in our church family.